I will admit that I'm a pretty even-keeled guy. I don't get too excited about stuff. But today, I am a fanboy or fangirl, whatever. I'm looking forward to sharing this with you. Let's go. My guest today is Lisa Congdon. Lisa is an artist, an author, an activist, a bike racer, a joy monger, and a person who has built a life by choosing curiosity over fear and even over pain. You might know her work for its color and optimism, its generosity of spirit. It is joyful in a way that feels intentional. It's hard-won joy, the kind that comes from paying attention. Lisa came to art and design later than most. And then just didn't catch up. She built a practice rooted in community and justice and showing up as her whole freaking self. Her work lives on walls and in books, and in classrooms, and in the lives of people who needed permission to be exactly who they are. I've been a huge fan of Lisa's work for a long time, not just because of what it looks like, but because of what it says and what it stands for. There's a courage in her clarity. There's kindness without apology. And there's a quiet insistence that joy matters, especially now. So today, I don't want to talk about her accomplishments or her accolades. I want to talk to her about where all this came from. So here we go. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Not all of my podcasts are interviews. It's a rare celebration. But I do start all the interviews the same by asking, Lisa, what made you weird as a kid?
Wow. I think probably all the same things that make me weird now. I come from a family of weirdos. And so I never really grew up feeling that weird because I was probably of everyone in my family the least weird. And so it's really been in my adulthood that I've recognized kind of like how my brain works differently that I didn't necessarily understand when I was a kid because I was always touted as the one who had her shit together. But I realize now that I'm an adult and I'm around other people that I'm definitely like not neurotypical. So I think the thing that made me the weirdest as a kid was probably that I was a total space cadet, as my parents used to call me, which was funny because they were also, everyone in my family is space cadet, which I think like 1970s lingo for ADHD.
Yeah.
So in school, I got called out a lot for staring off into space. And, I was one of those kids who probably, could have had a diagnosis, but because I was a girl and I was also super well behaved and wanted to please everyone, I got, I like slipped under the radar. But I definitely had, attention issues and my mind was always wandering. And that was probably what made me the weirdest. Not super weird, but yeah.
What advice or lessons do you remember that your parents gave you?
You know, that's a really interesting question. Um, my mom was the person in my life growing up who I was the closest to. I'm still pretty close to my mom. My parents are still alive. They're in their late 80s now, and they live in town, so I get to see them frequently. And my mom was, she's exactly 30 years older than me. And so she was sort of born in the 1930s and in the late 1930s, and had all kinds of and grew up on a farm. So she had a lot of the advice she gave me was like old wives' tales ish, you know? Um, but I do remember when I was in probably fourth grade, I had my first experience with a bully. And so there was a girl in the class who teased me incessantly, um, super mean to me. I hadn't really experienced that too much before. And I remember my mom, I would come home from school probably multiple days, like having anxiety, crying, feeling defeated. And I remember my mom told me something that stuck with me basically for the rest of my life. And that was, um, she said, because I think I was sort of blaming myself, I mean, I was upset that this girl was bullying me, but I think I took it as though something were wrong with me. And my mom said, "Lisa, when you squeeze an orange, what comes out?" And I was like, "Orange juice." And she's like, you know, "This girl, what's coming out of her right now is 100% her, and her stuff, like her issues, her own insecurity, her own problems, like it has nothing to do with you." And she used the analogy of like a piece of fruit, and it's filled with the juice of that fruit, and that is all. And she said, "You have to think of her as the orange and you're the apple." And it was this like really profound moment for me because I got it. And
Mm.
I still think about that to this day when people push my buttons. So yeah.
Oh, darling, I'm going to share that with my kids this afternoon when I pick them up from school.
It's a good one, right?
It is. It is. Actually, I was showing them your work earlier, and I will say, "Hey, I spoke with Lisa, and guess what she had?"
Love that.
um, uh, your work, I would say, is kind of prominently generous
Mm,
and inclusive.
mm,
Um, where did you learn empathy? Was it modeled, or did you invent that yourself?
mm. Interestingly, my parents, they're good people, but they're like sort of silent generation. They're like pre-boomer. And I grew up, this sort of story that I just told you about my mother was relatively rare. Like my mom was not uh like neither of my parents were sort of effusively affectionate or like I remember my mom like just telling us when we were little that she didn't compliment us too much because she didn't want us to get a big head, which meant like to be boastful or to think too much of yourself. And we know now that you actually, in order to help kids feel secure, you're supposed to actually like tell them often that you love them and like you know help them understand that they're not necessarily special, but that they're loved. And I didn't get a ton of that growing up. And so I spent a lot of like my junior high school years feeling pretty insecure and like very unsure of myself. And, I think for some people, not being told enough um, that they're okay and that they're safe in life might turn them into somebody who's sort of cold and treats other people with coldness. But for me, I think I understood on a deep level that I needed more love. And so I ended up getting that in other ways and like figure that out in therapy and everything. But for me, I think like the empathy that I hold really came from a place of not getting enough of it growing up and understanding how important it is. And, that I needed to surround myself with people who could show up for me and be there for me, and that I also needed to be that person to other people. Um, and so I think, of course you learn it from people, and I know I learned some of it from my parents and some of it from other adults in my life, but it was something that I chose like purposefully and intentionally when I was old enough to like make a choice about what kind of person I wanted to be in the world.
Lisa, tell me about. I love this. I love what you have in your brief description on your website. Tell me about being a joy monger and where can I sign up? And when did you first realize that joy is not only just a personality trait, but a fucking act of resistance?
Yeah. I think because I spent a lot of my young adult life in a state of kind of like nervous system dysregulation around who I was and what my purpose was, and whether I was any a piece of shit or not, like I went into a deep state of uh like I was definitely one of those people who was a seeker when I was
Mhm.
younger. Like I grew up sort of not, getting entirely what I needed to feel secure. And I think that's very common, um, especially for Gen Xers. Um, but I eventually got to this place where I was like, well, I remember going to therapy, and my therapist was like, I was like pretty much a victim and showed up in the world as a victim. And she presented to me that I had this amazing therapist when I was in my 30s. And she presented to me that that was a choice, and that if I could make the choice to be unhappy, and of course I had to believe that that was actually true. If I could make the choice to be unhappy, I could also make the choice to be happy. And so I went through this like deep exploration of, this idea of agency in my life, and like whether or not I had the agency to think differently about who I was, how I showed up in the world, the difference that I wanted to make, um, whether or not making that choice could really lead to a different kind of life and everyday experience.
Mhm.
And it did. And one of the things that I chose in that process of like going from being a sort of unhappy victim in the world to somebody who had agency was choosing joy. And that was something that, felt kind of radical at the time. People weren't really talking about joy very much. And my main form of expression is my art. And so, I had spent all of this time being really unhappy. And I think once I figured out that I could choose joy, not necessarily happiness, because happiness feels different to me than joy, but that I could choose to be joyful even in the face of hardship or the world being on fire or whatever. Um, that felt super empowering to me. And so I like started to message that through my work. And I think it resonated for a lot of people. And it's something that's really helped me get through um, a lot in my life.
Mhm. Super. The idea of coming into art and design later in life is kind of an anchor point for you, I think. And you even authored a book, right? You did Glorious Freedom: Older Women Leading Extraordinary Lives, right?
Mhm.
That is actually something that I like to talk about because I work with a lot of creatives and frustrated creatives, and I'm often moved by the line from I think it's Ralph Waldo Emerson that says most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And
Mhm.
for me, the reason that they lead lives of quiet desperation is because they know in their heart of hearts what they're capable of.
Mm.
but they took a job instead.
Mm.
Um, what part of yourself earlier did you learn to hide?
Earlier, do you mean like
Before you decided to become the Lisa Congdon that we know now,
yeah,
before art and
I
design
think
took
that
over?
I grew up very much believing that that it wasn't my place to shine at all.
Mhm.
Um, and I think again, these were messages I got a lot from my parents when I was a kid, like stay small, right? Don't have a big head. And I do remember like my parents, I think they're really proud of me and what I've accomplished. But I think it's still really strange, for example, for my dad, that I'm sort of as famous as I am. Like, I think it makes him really uncomfortable
Sure.
because I think I was raised with this idea that you should stay small and quiet and not draw attention to yourself. And in some ways, like being an artist whose career sort of collided with the kind of rise of social media and like, my art career was sort of built online in a sense, and I have a very large audience. Like that is something that is like really of the moment, right? It's not unusual now, but I was one of the first people to sort of do that in, as a self-taught artist who didn't already have fame. And that was like in some ways hard for me because I was always raised to feel like to hide and to be small and to kind of like hide anything about me that might be special or interesting.
Hmm.
Um, and I think sometimes it's still a little awkward for me, just, because we kind of are always like fighting those things that we were taught when we were little.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, uh, just an odd question.
Yeah,
You have siblings?
I do.
And
Yeah.
where are you in the in
I'm
the?
in the middle. We're all 2 years apart. Um, and yeah, I
Okay.
have a younger sister and an older brother.
Interesting. We have a very, I think we spoke about this before. We have a very similar upbringing. Um, can you talk to me about confidence? And is that a natural thing for you?
I think it's something that I've learned as I've gotten older. Um, I think it was like Debbie Millman, maybe once I had this conversation with her about confidence, and she was talking about it like being something that you don't necessarily have all of the time, but like this sort of like not I can do this, but I can try to do this. Like I can show up and try to do the thing, and I don't know if I'll do it perfectly. And thinking about it that way has been really transformative for me. Like in order to do the thing that you want to do, or you want to be good at, like you don't necessarily have to believe that you can do it perfectly, but you can believe that you can try and that you can show up to do it the best that you can. And that's a different definition of confidence in some ways. Like I know that I can try and I know that I can show up and I know that I can give it my all. And like that's where my confidence comes from. I also am a competitive cyclist and also later in life thing that I do. And I feel like with art, it's less of an issue for me because I've become so proficient at doing what I do that I don't struggle a lot with confidence. And I think, that's really kind of an amazing thing that like I've actually gotten to this place in my career where, I get an assignment from a client and I'm just like, I can do this. I know it might not be easy and I know that there's going to be struggles and ups and downs, but I know I can get through them. And I have that level of confidence. On the bike, not always, like I ride mostly off road and I'll embark on some like really technical trail or piece of terrain. And what I have to say to myself is like, I don't know for a fact that I can get to the end, but I have confidence that I can try. And
Mhm.
that, if I get to a spot where I'm too scared, I can turn around, I have agency, I have choice. So it's still something that I I shouldn't say I struggle with, but I think I try things that are hard for me more now as an older person than I did when I was younger, because I know trying isn't going to kill me. Like, I'm not going to die. Like, I'm not paralyzed by fear. So I don't know if it's like it's definitely not an emboldened confidence. Like, I got this necessarily all the time, but like, um, I know this thing isn't going to kill me. And I want to see how far I can push it or where I can go. So I'm going to try. And that's the kind of confidence that I feel like I have.
Cool. Cool. So it's always there in your back pocket.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I get asked on stage, like, how can you be so confident? And I have to be honest with them and say, I am not.
Right.
But if I had given this last hour-long speech in a less confident tone, then I'm being of no service to you. So it's kind of my job.
Exactly. I remember the first book that I wrote, it's called Art Inc. and it's a business book for artists. And it's over 10 years old now. But I remember when I was first writing it, I turned in the first draft and my editor was like, Lisa, this is great, but you need to be more authoritative. Like, in other words, like, I was using language like, this worked for me, but it might not work for you. And, and she's like, no, you've already built this business, like, out of your art. Like, you're you're successful. So like, tell people how you've done it. That's what people want to know. And that was such an interesting, like, piece of feedback that I got. And sometimes I try to apply it to other things in my life. Like, Lisa, be more authoritative.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Great advice. Um, speaking of books, you when I look at your body of work, you come off as extremely prolific. You have a number of books. You just had an exhibition. You've got a body of prints and big pieces and small pieces and originals. What? Tell me about. I want to say, what's the trick? Is it consistency? Is it showing up? I was having coffee earlier with a friend, and I am quote unquote supposed to be writing a book right now. And one of the things I talk about when I'm writing the book is I say, writing is not hard. Sitting is hard.
Yes. Agreed.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, we were talking earlier about the fact that I have to go, after we have a hard stop at the end of this interview. And that's because I just got my next book deal and have my first meeting with the editor. And so I'm about to embark on writing a book this year. And I haven't done that in a few years. For a while, as you mentioned, it was like a regular cadence for me. And I have to get myself back in that mindset of like long-term project.
Yeah.
Where you actually have to show up regularly or you will get, super behind. And books are kind of special that way because they're very long term. I mean, most illustration work that I do, I've had 2 jobs this past year that lasted several months, but that's pretty rare. Most of the time the turnaround is much faster than that. And so books are special because they're long, they take a long time.
Yeah.
And I think, whether it's juggling all the different things that I do or focusing in on one project, especially somebody who has a little bit of a monkey brain, and is a quote space cadet still.
Oh, you still carry that.
Sometimes I feel like I am more of a space cadet at 58 than I was when I was 8. But I think for me, the antidote to my whatever anxiety I have or inability to sit still for a very long time is discipline and routine. So I have learned about myself that I thrive when I have structure. And which is sort of antithetical to what a lot of people think works for people like weirdos like me whose brains are a little bit all over the place. But like I was talking about cycling earlier, like I've become a very strong cyclist in my older years because I am very disciplined about doing my workouts. I work with a coach. I also do strength training 3 times a week. And people are always like, how do you, on top of all the work that you do, how do you manage to fit all that in? And I'm like, because the structure of it is actually very calming for me. And it also keeps me in my body, because art is very cerebral, and writing can be very cerebral. So I like having like things also in my routine that ground me and that helps me kind of show up in other ways for my work. But yes, I think like having a routine, um, I work really hard to stay organized around my projects and set myself short-term goals. So I get really overwhelmed by like big things that are happening in the future. Like, oh, I have to write this whole book by this time. And what I've learned over the years is that if I break that big thing down into smaller parts and then set myself, goals around what I'm going to accomplish, that in these very manageable chunks, like literally from day to day, that really helps me to kind of manage my whole workload. I also am learning as I get older that I have less and less of a desire to do all the things and have so many parts of my business. And so I'm, spending a lot of time thinking about what I can let go of, and how I can simplify. Because I think I'm also realizing that I thrive more when I have more spaciousness in my life to like take care of myself and not be rushing all of the time, which is sort of how I operated for many years as I was growing my career.
Cool. Cool. You also describe yourself as an activist.
Mm.
Um, what I do as well, but what drives that? Is there an emotional engine to it? What
Yeah,
what?
I think I've always sort of been a person who, like, even when I was a little kid who like wanted to do the right thing. Um, like I was always that kid who was like nice to the dorky kids, even though I wasn't technically like one of the one of the extreme weirdos in class. Like I think I've always been a person who has sort of felt this need to, fight for the underdog. And I also, came out as queer when I was in my early 20s, and which was in the 1990s, and the world was a very different place at that time. And I think when you are like suddenly identifying, with a group of people who are marginalized, it doesn't always happen this way, I'm sure, but like for me, it sort of illuminated inequity and um like vulnerability in all kinds of communities, not just the one that I was part of, and opened my eyes you know to injustice everywhere in a way. And so when I was younger, I actually left teaching to go work for a nonprofit organization that worked in schools to improve education for kids of color. That was like my work for many years. And I remember when I left education to make art full time, like in a way, I felt sort of guilty because I was like, oh, like I guess I'm gonna have to volunteer now to my time to causes because I've left, giving my life to this, to this work. And now I'm gonna do this selfish thing like called art, right? And what I didn't realize at the time is that, and I figured this out pretty quickly, but like, oh, this is actually an opportunity to use my talent and skill to talk about the stuff that is important to me through my work.
Mhm.
And that sort of became the vehicle for being even more of an outspoken activist than I was when it was my daily work.
Mhm. Oh, very cool. Design nerd question.
Yeah.
Um, um, when I when I look at your work, and I've known your work for probably as long as you've been making it. I've always felt too seen two strong things in it. And I've just realized recently, doing some homework on you, that you cite Alexander Girard as a creative influence. I didn't see that.
I
What
love
I
that you didn't see that.
What's that?
I love that you didn't see that. That's
Yeah.
sometimes all I can see.
And I dig, I mean, I dig, I for a long time had that massive coffee table book of his, but what I always saw, which I think is just, again, it's my orange juice, is things I was interested in. One, the folk art aspect.
Yep.
And two, particularly crazy quilts. Crazy quilts?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Totally.
they're the most fantastic thing on the planet. And the third is not Alexander Girard, but Sister Coretta Kent.
Yeah. Yeah. I love all those things. And actually, interestingly, Alexander Girard was enormously influenced by folk art and started the Folk Art Museum in Santa Fe. And so I think, taking him on as somebody who is a big influence in my work is probably partly due to the fact that he also used folk art as inspiration in a similar way that I do. I love all those things. And fun fact, I love Sister Coretta, and in November of 2022, I got an email from my alma mater, and I went to a school called St. Mary's College in California, and there's a museum there, and they wrote to me and they were like, we are hosting an exhibit of Sister Coretta's work in September of 2023, and we would like but it's only going to take up half the museum. We would like you to fill the rest of the museum with your work in conjunction with hers. We know she's a big inspiration of yours. And it was like kind of a full circle moment for me, because here was my college alma mater, and I had like this really magical experience at school. So I really had sort of fond memories of college. So it was good. Telling me that they wanted me to come back. I was the first alumna to have a solo show there. And it was not an art school, it had like an art program, but at the time, like art classes, I don't even know if you could major in art. So anyway, that was something that I worked toward, and I made an entire body of work that was sort of spoke to Sister Coretta and her work. And so I can say I had a show with Sister Coretta.
That's excellent.
Posthumously for her, but that was like an amazing moment. And actually it was all screen prints, all serigraphs, because that was her.
Yeah.
That was her. When they first asked me to have the show, they were like, you can do whatever you want. And I was like, well, clearly I'm going to make, 57 serigraphs because that's what Sister Coretta would have done. So
It's really super. What a great story.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Last year you had a solo exhibition, and it was called The Way Through. Okay. So I am a right now you're thinking, oh man, I wish James Victori could be my mentor, my guru. Hell, I wish he was my coach. Well, you can make that happen. Go to yourworkisagift.com. There's a questionnaire that will probably help you out, but it'll also give you access to a free call. So let's talk. Let's free you from overwhelm and creative frustration. Let's build your business and help you get paid to do what you love. Again, go to yourworkisagift.com. Let's talk. A student of Marcus Aurelius and meditations, the Stoicism, and his from his diary, his journal, he says, what stands in the way becomes the way, right? The obstacle becomes the way. And it's about changing your perspective, and obstacles not being roadblocks, but opportunities. If you can see right? Tell me about the origins of the way through.
Yeah, so I in at the end of 2024, I had the first of two total knee replacements. Um, and so I took 3 months off of work, 6 months off my bike,
Oof.
and out of the gym. And before I left to go home for 3 months from my studio, I got this big plastic bin and I like piled in all these art supplies because I knew that having this time, it was like the first sort of intentional break that I had taken in my adult life.
Mhm.
And, yeah, it was to have this very painful, intense, invasive surgeries on my knees, but like it was still like I could check out. And there's something about checking out with permission that is very freeing. And I was like, okay, I can read, I can do puzzles, I can do all these, I can just chill. And by the way, I found out I'm really good at chilling. I was very worried that like I was going to be a mess because I was going to have to sit still for so long, but it turns out I'm pretty good at it. Anyway, so I was like, oh, and I can make art and I can just do whatever I want because I had like, finished all my client work, didn't take any new client work. So I fill up this bin with all these art supplies. And then about 2 weeks after my first surgery, I was like well enough to sit at a table. And I just dug in the bin and pulled out the sketchbook and was like, okay, I'm going to make collage because that felt like the easiest thing for me to do. And then I got pretty addicted to collaging and I made this behemoth sketchbook that had, sometimes I made 2 or 3 collages in a day, sometimes only one. And I like did them pretty much every day until my second surgery and then took a short break after my second surgery and then started again and got really into it. And when I got back to the studio after 3 months, I, of course, intended to continue keeping this sketchbook, but instantly got back into regular life and realized it was sort of a marker of time of that time in my life, and that was fine. Simultaneously, I was like, oh shit, I have a solo show this summer in July. This was in February of last year. And I was like, I don't know, have any clue what I'm going to make for this show. And I got this idea that like maybe I could turn some of the collages that I had made into paintings. And so the exhibition became sort of like this collage sketchbook, which, by the way, part of what I love about sketchbooks is that, you're putting something in a book. And so you're not making it to sell. You're not necessarily even thinking about it as something that could turn into something else. Like it's just art for art's sake. It's exploration for exploration's sake. And so all of the collages are super wonky. Some of them are narratives, some of them are more abstract, but they're all, I did them pretty quickly. They all have these kind of wonky cut marks. But I realized like that's what was special about them. So when I made the paintings, I tried as much as possible to like keep the weird edges in things. And so it was like transforming this, body of work that I made kind of in my style, but out of cut paper into 2D paintings
Mhm.
and super fun. And most of them are a lot bigger than obviously the pages in the sketchbook. And some of them did not translate well to painting. So I did a lot of experimenting and some of them made amazing paintings. I had to change the background color in some cases, but yeah, I had this whole exhibit of paintings of collages. And the way through was sort of like my way of describing what collage became to me during that time. I was like basically by myself most of the time in living in the basement of my house because I was not walking up and down stairs a ton. And I had access to a television and a microwave. And of course, I would go up and downstairs to the kitchen and my wife would come down and help me with things. But I was mostly down there. And I got kind of depressed and, I was going to physical therapy every day and like that was like torture. It was
Yeah.
are really, really painful.
Oh yeah.
And sitting down and doing collage was this very grounding exercise for me. And it was like the thing that brought me joy, probably more than doing puzzles and more than reading books, which are two things I love to do, by the way. And it just was like basically my way through that time. And so the show then became this way of honoring that process, and sort of turning it into something, that turned out to be really magical, into something that other people could experience and absorb. So, I'd kind of created this new visual language in a way through my collages that made its way into this other body of work. And people were asking me like, oh, does this mean that is this point to a new direction for you? And I'm like, I don't really think so. I think this is just like a marker of like this time in my life. And I'm not sure I'll ever do anything like that again. Um, but that's okay with me. Like not everything has to sort of become something else.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, no, I had major a major accident. I think it's now like 5 years ago, where I broke my right collarbone and all of my ribs on the right side, and it is amazing how fast the body atrophies and
Mhm.
how hard it is to come back.
Yeah, I actually have spent, I mean, now it's been, I went back to work in February of 2025. And so it's been a year that I've been back, and I've been back on my bike since the middle of March of last year.
Mhm.
And I'm now back to like full fitness and deadlifting more than I did lifted before. So like, I'm like totally back, but what a journey last year was.
Yeah,
Like, just you have to like remind yourself like to just keep showing up,
yeah,
because eventually you'll get there, and it feels like you never will, but yeah.
excellent, excellent. Here's a simple question: can art save lives?
Yes, it saved mine. That is for sure.
Ah,
Absolutely.
I predicted that answer.
Yeah, yeah, it did.
I was thinking about talking to you, and I'd done my homework, and I wrote these questions, and then I had a moment. I was like, James, what would you want to be asked? And what I wanted to be asked was, um, Lisa, what's the one question that you wish someone would ask you in in an interview? Because you've been interviewed, probably, as much or more than I have. What's the one question that no one's ever asked?
Hmm. I mean, I feel like I've been asked most things. I don't know. I think like maybe what brings you the most joy, or what is your idea of like the perfect day?
Ah, ah. Okay, well, I do have that question. Hang on one second. Can you describe for me? I mean, you are like me. You are sensitive, and it is a shitty fucking time right now to be sensitive.
Mhm.
There was a war on being woke, and I cannot. You know, to be woke is difficult right now. To be compassionate, to be understanding, to be able to see, both sides and understand. Um, can you describe for me, or can you tell me what your wish for a beautiful future is?
Mm. I love that riff on my perfect day. I mean, what I see happening right now on the upside of all of this is that people are waking up. People who did not think that what is that the inhumanity being pummeled on brown and black people in particular, and queer people,
And women,
that doesn't affect them. And what I think people are waking up to is that no one is immune from that hatred. And that when you stand up for, or literally stand in the way of protecting people from harm, you then become the target also. And that, yeah, one could argue that like basic decency and like understanding and being empathetic towards and sensitive towards other people's pain and suffering or the injustice that other people experience is enough. But I think for some people, it's like, it doesn't affect me, so I don't care. And what I see happening is that more and more people are waking up to caring, even some people who, were formerly MAGA.
Mm-hmm.
And I that like I hate that what's happening has had to happen for people to wake up, but I have never not even in 2016, when I saw a lot of this, I have never seen so many people come out of the woodwork and say, this is not okay with me on the internet.
Cool.
People who've been previously maybe privately progressive in their politics, supportive of social justice movements, but never say on their business feed or in their work profile or even on their personal profile, like never spoken out, and people are speaking out. And I think the more like I predict that on March 28th, we will see the next No Kings rally, we will see larger crowds than we have ever seen. And so for me, like a future that I look for is where everyday people who have lived in the comfort of their privilege for their entire lives will start to march in the street for people who do not have that privilege. And I think we're seeing that more and more and more. Yes, there is a divide, but I do think that people are waking up and willing to have that wokeness be part of their everyday language, in a way that that they've maybe hidden it before, been secretly, activists are now like, we all the time we hear people talk about what radicalized them,
Yeah.
and I just am, I'm heartened by how many people are being radicalized by what's happening right now in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a future where so much good is happening because of that. And I don't know what that looks like exactly yet, but I do actually am one of those people who has a lot of hope for the future.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am as well. And I have I have two beautiful angels around me, a lot. I'm a single dad with two kids, and last night before bed, I felt Nova is 8 and Wyatt is 10.
Your
And
kids are adorable, by the way. I see them often on your social media, and they look amazing.
they are kind and generous kids. It's really, I'm extremely lucky. Last night we had I was like, I think they're ready, and I had them watch this beautiful black poet. She read this poet about white privilege, and they listened to the whole thing, and then we had the conversation about what white privilege is, because we need them. They are the future. I'm afraid of the trickle down. I'm afraid of other kids being taught in different ways. So especially, I live in a small town, Texas, where we are not I don't know if we're the majority or not. So I got one last little thing for you. You don't know this, but the 8-year-old Lisa Congdon is sitting with us here. What do you think she thinks of you?
That made me feel a little emotional. I think she feels full and like she's living fully, and like she is like her life is everything that she hoped it would be, but maybe for a period of time never thought was possible, but now she knows it is. So yeah.
Excellent. Lisa Congdon, Thank you for a beautiful conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Okay.